Okay.
Virus restrictions.
Okay.
He faced
Darius
a largely
okay,
empty
Darius?
I am here.
Are you driving?
Due to COVID restrictions.
No.
Oh, okay.
I'm stable.
Okay, good. No worries.
Supreme Court member, one
Okay.
top military officer,
All right,
and
so
no
I
need
am
for a
up on.
designated
Yep,
survivor,
got you,
since all
Chaparral.
but
Thank
two
you.
cabinet members weren't even there. Even the scene behind the president is
And-
different.
Madam Speaker.
So we're going to come up today,
Madam Vice
everybody.
President.
Hey, Linear
Noting
Bob,
no president
up
before
there in
had
San
said those
Jose,
words
Linda,
from that podium.
Brian.
And
It's wonderful
about
hearing your
time.
voice.
A social
Can
media
you bring down
agitator
the
linked
radio,
to the assault
please?
on the Capitol has been
Thank you so much. You don't have to take it all the way down. I need to know that it's still
members
there.
of Congress. The
But it was
jurors
just a little
rejecting
loud.
Brendan Hunt's
Thank you.
assertion that he never thought his threats would be taken seriously. This is AP News.
But it's good to.
A sheriff's deputy is dead. The fate of his canine partner not known after they were shot while checking a home in Boone, North Carolina yesterday morning. The Watauga County Sheriff's Department says Sergeant Chris
It's good
Ward
to hear
was
your voice,
dispatched to the home
Darius.
after the homeowner and his family did not.
Yes.
They were hit with gunfire after they entered the home.
Okay,
The
very
dog
good.
is still
This is what I
inside.
needed.
Other law enforcement have had the home surrounded
Okay.
since. No word on the people inside the home. A North Carolina judge cam video of last week's shooting death of Andrew Brown Jr. will not be released for at least 30 days. Judge Jeffrey Foster did rule Brown family members can privately view 5 body camera videos as well as a dashboard camera video in 10 days.
And how's
after
the family,
portions are blurred
Darius?
or redacted. Protesters
They are wonderful.
Good.
Making things happen.
Bless your heart. So we're going to bring you on. Make sure you're out by 6:20, okay?
I'm Tim McGuire, AP News.
Okay.
6:20.
WCPT.
You mean 6:05?
No. You're out. That you're done by then.
We
Done.
are Chicago's progressive talk,
Okay.
where facts matter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now you're
Normally you say 5
No.
minutes.
I'm going to. Yeah, it's going to be fine. I go a little longer with my headlines, but I'm just saying make sure everything that you are done by then. If you can be done by about 6:18, 6:19, that would be great. But that is the cutoff time, okay?
Okay.
That's what I'm saying.
390 to downtown. It's 23 minutes. Inbound Stevenson, 23 minutes from the Veterans Memorial Tollway to Lakeshore Drive. The ramp to the inbound Rhine is heavy.
So.
Rhine delay start before Cermak now. 13 minutes, 95th to downtown.
Okay, hey everybody. Of course, we're going to be talking about the Barbara Jean. And
work is wrapping up on
we're going to be talking about the president's speech last night
and on the eastbound
and some of the takeaways. We're also going to look at the militarization of the police.
That's traffic.
That's a really big deal.
Tom Hartman.
Republicans have been trying to cancel the minimum wage ever since it was enacted in the 1930s. They've successfully canceled any increases in it for over a decade. Republicans have gone out of their way to try and cancel Americans' health care. They've been on a Jeremiah against Obamacare. They took that all the way to the Supreme Court twice.
So let me say hello to you, Samantha, Linear Bob, Brian, Linda, Barbara Jean.
11 a.m. to 2 p.m.
Let me see, Carol, how you doing? Yolanda. Everybody like and share. Please like and subscribe on the Santita Jackson show.
The story of the Luddites and what they fought for has consisted of violence and rejecting technology.
1 minute.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Let's have a great show.
Unwillingness to accept technology. But a closer look shows the Luddites were neither. The Luddites had come into prominence in Yorkshire around 1812, but prior to that, Parliament had passed the Combination Act, effectively outlawing unions. This, combined with technological changes within the textile industry, were increasingly leaving highly paid skilled workers out of work because their job could now be done cheaper and faster by unskilled workers
30.
injured by the new machines. In reality, the Luddites were neither inept nor against technology. They smashed the machines as a form of protest.
All right, everybody, let's have a great show.
And run by apprenticed workers who got
Say a
paid a
little
decent
prayer,
wage.
Pastor Brooks.
After 15.
Great show.
Moment in labor. We're working for your rights.
10.
Okay, thank you.
Because facts matter. You are listening to WCPT
5.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It's Thursday, April 29th, 2021. I'm Santita Jackson coming to you from WCPT 820 in Chicago. AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and all over the country, all over the world. I want you to meet my morning stars, the Santita Jackson Morning Stars, on Facebook and on YouTube. On Facebook, they're on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. Everybody get on over there. We have some really wonderful conversations. And of course, please like and subscribe on my YouTube channel. Yes, I have a channel, the Santita Jackson Show. Please like and subscribe there. Some people meet a lot of folks go over there too. So that's wonderful. And of course, WCPT 820. I'm on that Facebook page as well. And on Reverend Jackson's page. So let's get right to it, everybody. I want you to call me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. You can text me at that number. GWC Injury Lawyers gives you that opportunity, but I need you to call me at 773-763-9278. What did you think of President Biden's speech last night? Wow. That's what I can say. It's a wow. It's a wow. Because there was a lot that he put in there. There's a lot that he put on the table domestically, internationally, and I think we need to talk about it. Today, we're also going to be talking about the militarization of the police. Did you see the police as they went into Andrew Brown's neighborhood and as they're going into all of our neighborhoods all over the country? The militarization of the police is something we need to pay attention to. We really, really do. So we're going to be talking about that because, of course, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act would counteract a lot of that. In fact, Democrats, as recently as in the past couple of weeks, have asked for local police departments not to be given military gear. That's what they're being given, and they're behaving that way. I'm thinking of President Eisenhower, who said, wow, the impact of this military industrial complex on our spiritual life. He put that in there as well. We're not ready for this, and it's not good for the American project. So we're going to talk about that with Netfa Freeman, who is from the Institute for Policy Studies, does a lot of great work in that space. And of course, we're going to be talking with Dr. Max Wolf about the money in these packages that President Biden is calling for. He's not only talking about building bridges. You know, this was a she session. Women lost jobs in this pandemic. More than 50 million of us had to leave our jobs, the jobs that we lost, and the jobs that we had to leave because we had to take care of our children, our parents, our families. We're still the caregivers. We do have an extra job, everybody. You know that's real. So, what does all that mean? Because in his infrastructure, he's also talking about family infrastructure, daycare, childcare, assistance that other Western countries give to their families that we don't give. So, and they look at us and say, "Whoa, why are you still paying for all? Why are you going out of pocket for your health care? That's crazy. And why aren't you getting an assist with your children?" So, and your families. So, got a lot to talk about today. And of course, our COVID-19 update with Dr. Deborah Holden. But first, we're going to get right into some of these headlines. Let's get right to it, Paul. Chicago, we're going to have a high of 57 degrees, showers. And in Minneapolis, St. Paul, 64 degrees. Partly cloudy. Let's bring it down just a little bit, Paul. And the NASDAQ closed down 39 points. The Dow closed down 164 points. The S&P 500 closed down 3 points. And in Major League Baseball, wow, the Twins, wow, they walloped Cleveland 10-2. And today, the White Sox will be hosting the Detroit Tigers. Well, the Chicago Cubs were shut out by Atlanta yesterday, 10-0. But today, maybe they'll redeem themselves. They'll be playing Atlanta today. Everybody, did you see the speech last night? The first speech that President Joe Biden, was able to give before Congress. Can you imagine? He's been waiting to do this almost 50 years. He went into Congress in 1972 as a U.S. Senator, ran for president in the 80s, ran for president in 2008, and finally got there in 2020. And he spoke to a room that didn't have the normal 1,600 people. There was about 200 because of COVID-19 restrictions. And he delivered this first address on the eve of his 100th day in office, which is actually today. And he focused his speech on what many people are saying is ambitious and maybe politically divisive, because he is calling for even more money. He made no apology for passing the massive coronavirus relief bill without Republican support and called on legislators to swiftly act on other top-line issues like police reform, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, for example, his infrastructure spending, and the American Families Plan. There is so much, and we're going to be talking about that today. What did you think about that today, everybody? Coronavirus news. The European Union has agreed to buy up to 1.8 billion doses of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. If the deal is finalized, it would mark the world's biggest single deal for a COVID-19 vaccine. The EU has struggled to secure enough vaccine doses, everybody, for member countries after this AstraZeneca deal fell through. They failed to give them the amount of doses that they need. Wow. So they're suing AstraZeneca over this breach of its vaccine supply contract. Wow. In India, the government has bought at least 205 million and a half doses of COVID-19 vaccines, making the country one of the top vaccine buyers in the world. However, that number only covers about 8% of its population. Remember, India is the second most populous country on earth. Federal prosecutors indicted 3 men accused of killing Ahmaud Arbery, the people we saw killing him in that video, on hate crime and attempted kidnapping charges. Arbery was 25 years of age. He was jogging near Brunswick, Georgia in early 2020 when he was chased down in a truck and we saw him killed. We saw the killing, everybody. His killing was one of those painful incidents of last year. Of course, that preceded what happened to Breonna Taylor and to George Floyd. So we will see how all of that goes. And federal agents executed search warrants yesterday at the apartment, the home of the former mayor of New York City, in New York City, the personal lawyer of President Trump, Rudy Giuliani. Wow, his former personal lawyer, everybody. He's been the focus of a long-running criminal investigation concerning his activities in Ukraine. Whether he conducted illegal lobbying. When you lobby for a foreign country, you have to declare yourself as such, everybody. And, well, many people saying it's about time. It's about time that something like that happened. Black Americans of all levels, according to this study from The Guardian, this is their story. We're breathing air pollution, whether we're breathing factory fumes and truck exhaust in urban centers or choking on dust on rural farm roads. People of color, black people in particular, face exposure to more sources of harmful fine particle air pollution than white people, according to a new study from the University of Illinois. Wow. That's right. So we're going to have to get them on so that we can talk about that. And then there's a study commissioned by Senator Bernie Sanders that shows that the U.S. pays up to 2 to 4 times more for prescription drugs than other nations. What about that? Let's get some good news from the pastor of Grace Central Church, the Grammy Award-winning producer and psalmist, the great Pastor Darius Brooks. Give us some good news, Pastor Brooks.
Hey, Santita, I hope everything is great with you guys. I am so excited. If you notice, I'm saying I am so excited. If you notice, I said I am so excited. Santita, the Word of God is a mirror. It's not a window. And every time you look at the Word of God from a window's perspective is what everybody else should and shouldn't be doing. God can never bless you there or help you operate in abundance, or he'd have to violate his word. And God ain't going to violate his word for no one. The Word of God is a mirror. Watch this. You don't have to believe it, but girl, it's true. Did you hear what I said? You don't have to believe it, but it's true. I'm reminded of Hebrews 12:1, and he says, wherefore seeing we also are compassed about with a great cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which doth so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race. Watch this now, that is set before us. Watch this, and we're going to kill a punchline, not an exclamation, but an exclamation. Looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. Santita, if I had to talk about anything today, I would tell somebody, you don't have to believe it, but it's true, and it'll work if you work it. Everyone prayerfully, my prayer is that we understand that there is a natural and a spiritual aspect of life. There is a natural and spiritual aspect of life. We cannot get around these two experiences. And one of them works the way it works, and one of them works the way it works. And so when we understand this when it comes to God, there's a natural side of us and there's a spiritual side of us. Santita, due to personal reasons, I'm taking the weight off. And if you get in the mirror, and we're going to places now, and take the weight off, watch this. When Pastor Reverend Barrow used to say, we're not as much divided as we are disconnected. And we can do more together than we can ever do by ourselves. But you got to be in a place by yourself to have a mindset to want to do something together with other people. I pulled up to my office after a snowplow, moved our snow, only to find another idea of where and how my parking sign should be. I had a cone and had to move it every time I parked there. I had an orange cone. But when the snow came, it taught me how to do something a little bit differently. And so now the stand I have stands up in the ground. Watch this. So that now it doesn't matter whether it's snow or it's just beautiful outside. I ain't got to move a cone nowhere. Santita, when we trust God and when we get into his word, God's word is here for what's right. It's to help us. It's to assist us first in our own personal lives. It's for you. It's for me. And it's designed for everyone individually. We can't do this corporately. It's designed for every one of us individually. And you have to say things like, I don't have to judge a bad relationship more than I need to create a new or experience a new one. The crazy stuff, we don't have to judge it. We can create a new experience in our lives. Like, for instance, I think about often your father. And I understand and know without a shadow of doubt, I'm a pastor. I sing, you always mention it about Grammys. But there's some areas in my life, Santita, that I don't know nothing about. So if it's something literally political or something like this, and I'm into the politics, but I'm not political because I've learned how to know people for who they are. Yeah. So I got to call my friend Santita. I got to call Jonathan. I got to call Reverend or push come to show. My point is, who's in my ear has a lot to do with how I hear. And God's word tells us that we're going to deal with this stuff. Everybody you look at is a witness. What you talking about, Brooks? I'm glad you asked. When we get in the natural and fight with the spiritual, which dominate the natural and spirit and in truth. When we get into we're in the natural, but we use the spiritual to dominate the natural. He says, and they that worship me must worship me in spirit and in truth. You don't have to believe it, but it's true.
Amen, amen, amen. I love that. You don't have to believe it, but it's true. Pastor Darius Brooks, everybody. That's right. Your will is what is best for me. That's right. You don't have to believe it, but it's true. It's true, whether you believe it or not. You know what? We've got Dr. Deborah Furr Holden on. You don't have to believe her, but it's true what she says. The Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University, talking to us about, well, the latest and greatest on COVID-19. Dr. Deb, how you doing today? Dr. Deb? Okay, let's bring Dr. Deb up and let's talk about the latest. There's so much that's going on, everybody. We're talking about people who are being incentivized to getting vaccines. In some places around the United States, the vaccines are in danger of going bad because the requests for vaccines, it's beginning to dissipate, and not even 30% of us have received these shots yet. So what's going on, and what can you do to protect yourself no matter what? Do we have Dr. Deborah Furr Holden up now?
We do now.
Okay, Dr. Deb.
I'm here.
Okay, very good. Hey, we're seeing that a lot of these vaccine doses are in danger of going bad even today. Around the country because the demand, while the supply is there, the demand has gone down. What do you make of that?
Well, so we got a couple of things happening. And I'm still hearing the stories of people who want the vaccine who are still having problems getting it. And so we got a couple of things. One, the system that people use for vaccine administration, I think, has backfired. I don't think this was well planned out. And, we had a session with Dr. Slawi and Dr. General Perna, who is the chief operating officer and chief medical officer of Operation Warp Speed. It was their job, it is their job, to ensure that the vaccine got distributed and administered fairly, equitably, and efficiently. And I asked them what the plan was to do that. So what we did originally is we marginalized a lot of people, right? A lot of people just simply couldn't get it. They got stuck on wait lists, et cetera. And then we saw, all the line jumping and people putting up, having parties where they were vaccinating people while we had people in these early priority categories who were not able to get it. So I think that created a bit of resentment. Then the president made mass eligibility the case and encouraged all states to do that by May 5th. I'm not sure if that has happened, but I know most states now have mass eligibility. I'm sorry, by May 1st. So I would imagine, and I'll give you an update on May 1st, how many states do and do not have mass eligibility. So now, where before supply was being outpaced by demand, now you've got people who have settled in, have had whatever experience they've had, they've accepted that experience. Many people are still stuck on wait lists, and now we have a problem with vaccine waste. And vaccine waste has always been a problem that we really have not talked enough about, whether it be wasted doses or wasted whole vials or wasted whole shipments of vaccine. And so now we're at that point where now more than ever, with the increase in variants, with the surges that we're seeing in places like Michigan and some other states that I'm convinced are also surging, they're just not as good as collecting the case data to be able to substantiate it and report it. Now we're in a different situation where we really need the vaccine. We really need people to get the vaccine. We have vaccine available, and we have some people who either lost interest, it's just no longer a top priority, or they still remain with barriers to getting it. I think what needs to happen now is getting a vaccine should be as easy as buying a pack of gum. You should be able to go to a vaccine site and get your vaccine with no appointment, with no barriers, with no wait, with no anything. And I think for people who need it, we should be delivering the vaccine and administering it on their doorstep. That's what I think we need to be doing. I think all of these other efforts, just the way this whole thing had been rolled out, it just wasn't, to me, it wasn't thoughtful enough, and it wasn't sensitive enough to what the real needs were.
Well, then what about
And we
this?
just can't keep doing that.
Well, then what about the people who have pulled back because of the issues with AstraZeneca, which has now been renamed, and the issues with the J&J vaccine? What about the people who have decided, I don't think I'm going to get the second dose because I was reluctant in the first place, and now I don't know. What do you say to those people they're not hesitant, they were skeptical in the first place? I think hesitant was not the right word. People were skeptical, And I'm saying this is not unique to the United States, for example. I think I hear something in the background, Deborah.
It's because I walked outside.
Oh, okay. No,
okay, go ahead.
I need you to get back in. Thanks. Because we're going to the Olympics in Japan, right? 1%, fewer than 1% of that population are inoculated against COVID-19. Because they had a bad experience with vaccines, a little more than 20 years ago with measles and rubella. So, and what do you say to people who are still skeptical? Because there, for sure, I think access is an issue, but I also think skepticism is an issue too. Because Americans, we were slow walked into this, right?
Yeah, hesitancy is something that we're going to ongoingly have to deal with. And people are going to have to make tough choices. I'm not pretending that the choice is an easy one. And I understand the media controls the narrative. And a lot of the things that we're hearing, some of them are just scary, right? You hear blood clot, and every time you think of a blood clot, you think of somebody that that's had a stroke or had an aneurysm or something like that. And that's pretty scary. But it's because we're leading with the facts that are scary and not the facts that are empowering. You know, the likelihood of a blood clot from the vaccine, based on the data we have, is so insignificantly low. The likelihood of a blood clot from COVID is very high. When you counterbalance those two things out, you'd much rather have the vaccine than have COVID. So I think we got to just keep bringing the good information forward and give people what they need to grapple. I do think we have to honor and respect the no's, especially a well-informed no. What breaks my heart is when people say no for things that are not based in reality, that are not based on fact. But some of the people have legitimately waited out and said, I'm a no or a no for now. I think what we need to focus on is making sure people have good, credible information. And for the people that are a yes, that we do the work to get the shot in the arm. If we just simply did that, I think we'd have a lot more progress and a very different prospect and outlook. Going to a place where a lot of people are unvaccinated, for me, wouldn't be an option. I would only do that if I was required to, and I definitely wouldn't do it unvaccinated.
But, that's what they're doing with the Olympics. Yeah. I mean, look at Japan. Yep. I mean, I heard that on NPR. And now, you know me, I had to chase it down. It's not that I disbelieve them. I said, I just need to see more stories, more data on this. And I said, wait, we're sending these athletes over there? No. I mean, if the baseline is get the shots to mitigate the severity of COVID-19.
1 minute.
What are we doing? I've got literally a hard 30 seconds, and you've got them.
Well, it doesn't make sense to me that we would send our athletes to a place where the lion's share of the population is unvaccinated and vaccines aren't available. This is the global equity issue that we have to face. And remember, we talk about the 3 vaccines mostly that are available here, but there are many vaccines being used all across the country. I think we need to elevate the global movement around vaccine information and vaccine safety. And we have to continue the surveillance of adverse outcomes. We have to continue that work.
And talk about
and people need to understand, and they need to balance out the risk.
15.
They need to put it in perspective so that people can make well-informed choices. People are
10.
Smart enough to make halfway decent decisions for their health, but
5.
in a maze of misinformation and a narrative that's being driven by the media.
That's it. Yeah. Well, they're driving a lot of information. And so Dr. Deborah Verholzen, of course, you can catch her here on the Santita Jackson Show early in the morning, giving you the best information on this COVID-19 pandemic. Let's talk about the militarization of the police in just a few minutes on the Santita Jackson Show. Oh, Dr. Deb?
Yeah, I had to walk outside because everybody in my house is asleep.
No.
And so we're right by the highway. So then I started I walked down into the alley so it could be quieter.
No, honey, babe, you can hear it all, unfortunately. But thank you so much for everything here. I know I'm running. I'm trying to get. What's going on, sweetie? What's up?
No, it's cool because a lot of people in the neighborhood, wherever I am, if I'm traveling, the people in the neighborhood become the in-person fans of the show.
Oh, really?
So people following me in the parking lot, in the alley, just listening to the conversation.
Oh, they are so sweet. Well, you're someone to listen to, I tell you that. So I want to thank you every morning.
Well, it's good. We need balanced perspectives and good information. I fundamentally believe that. I get where people are, and I get why they are, where they are. And it's interesting because now I have a nice cohort of people around me who are all vaccinated. Mm-hmm. So, like, my cousin is having a graduation party for her son, and she has decided to not make it a vaccine-only party. My daughter's baby shower will be a vaccinated-only party. For people who are vaccinated, they can come in, they can be unmasked. My daughter will be masked. She will not be hugging anybody. Mm-hmm. But for the others, it'll be drive-up, and we'll also be broadcasting live.
We have Mr. Freeman.
And what the CDC is doing, we should unpack the CDC recommendations.
I mean, I think you need to unpack last night. How the the speech. But you know what? I got to get on to Mr. Freeman. But we should talk about that because I said this is interesting. It's interesting.
Yeah, and let's get CK and talk about the legal implications. I saw the Southwest article.
Okay.
I think we're going to see a lot more of that as people are forced back to work or training or things like that, and can clearly link their COVID infection to these mandatory, workplace events and things like that. Well, this is going to be an increasing problem.
Well, remember they pulled corporations out of that. That's what happened under the Trump administration and the Reagan administration. All these administrations, Democrat and Republican, have absolved corporations from responsibility for injuries on the job, including this disease. It's terrible. But let me bring on Mr. Freeman because I want to make sure that I have his introduction right. Love you, Dr. Deb. Net for Freeman.
All right, my friend. I'll see you tomorrow.
Absolutely. Mr. Freeman?
Yes, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you. Now, how, beyond the Institute for Policy Studies, how would you like to be introduced?
Well, I'm an organizer in Pan-African Community Action in Washington, D.C., PACA, and I'm a coordinating committee member of the Black Alliance for Peace.
Black Alliance for Peace.
Oh, we're not on yet. I texted it to you, too. I'm sorry I did it late.
I just did it. Okay. Well, let me take a look.
1 minute.
I just did it
Okay, no worries. Because I've seen that, but when you read up on people, you just never know what's current. Because you might have just left something.
And that's the most relevant,
5 minutes before. But people are familiar here with because this is a big progressive station, Institute for Policy Studies, and I'll bring everything else in. Okay?
Oh, okay.
Okay, no worries. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Mm. 15. 10. 5.
4.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. Call me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. I want to know what you think about the militarization of the police. We're seeing a lot of that, everybody, a lot of that. We're seeing when you looked at the police and how they moved into Andrew Brown's neighborhood in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, when we find out that the Ohio police officer who shot Ma'Khia Bryant is a military-trained marksman. Well, we're seeing House Democrats pushing President Biden to limit the transfer of military gear to local police, and on it is going. I mean, you see that the Dante Wright protesters have been facing militarized police officers and the National Guards persons and all of that. Our police force, our local police force, has now turned into a military force, a militarized force. What is it militarization of America's police doing to us? Does it make them more apt to kill? Remember, they used to be officers of the peace. Now they're militarized. And when you're militarized, you're trained to kill, right? So I want to talk with someone who's done so much brilliant work in this space from the Institute for Policy Studies. Indeed, he's an organizer in the Pan-African Community Action, PACA, in Washington, D.C., and he's from the Black Alliance for Peace. Netfa Freeman, brilliant organizer and just a thought leader. Thank you so much for being with us today.
No, thank you for having me.
We're looking at North Carolina. We're looking at Andrew Brown and trying to get some answers, getting stonewalled by the legal system, right? So we don't, the family, I think one designated family member, a lawyer, can see the tapes, but they first have to blur the faces of the police officers and their badges. Okay, got that. It's a small town. I don't know how people are not going to know who was there, but there we go. And then we find out Ma'Khia, she was not shot by some guy who just shot at her randomly. He's an expert marksman, military trained. When Dante Wright's supporters went out to demonstrate their dissatisfaction with how he was killed, they were met with a military force. What does all of this mean? What does this say?
Well, I think this is the militarization of the police. This actually shows what the purpose of that was. In the very early beginnings of this, people might remember the SWAT TV programs and the SWAT teams, the Special Weapons and Tactics Forces. That was the earliest manifestations of militarized police forces, and these police forces were militarized to stop the legitimate responses of the people, the organized responses of the people for self-defense. The first SWAT teams, a lot of people don't know it, were actually formed in response to the Black Panther Party. And the first use of the SWAT team was in Oakland, Oakland, California, and they had a long standoff with Black Panther Party. And then you fast forward into I think it's the 70s or the late 70s or the 80s, and which is not long, where they did a more formalized and heightened militarization of the police made it part of the National Defense Authorization Act under Bill Clinton. And so it's renewed under that all the time. And it's so-called supposed to be in response to the war on drugs, which also has a whole lot of other stuff. And we know how the war on drugs has caused mass incarceration, has spiked mass incarceration and things like that. But, in terms of dealing with why the drug problem in the U.S. is the way it is, as a whole nother issue that we could talk about that also implicates the CIA in the United States. But then now when we all fast forward again and we come to the killing of Michael Brown and the uprisings around Michael Brown, what most people associate with the Black Lives Matter movement, that's when we really saw, the people knew that the police were being militarized. And so because then you saw them in our neighborhoods. So the militarization of the police, and then we also see them, of course, we just saw them last summer, a heightened militarized police presence in response to what we refer to as the George Floyd uprisings. And basically the militarization of police is for the state and the status quo and the rulers, the state that's actually under the control of the rich, is to keep us in line, to keep the masses of people in line and in control when it comes to being dissatisfied with the status quo. And so people will go to the streets and there'll be demonstrations and whatnot, and all the politicians will get on media and try to make a delineation, try to make a divide between the quote unquote good protesters and the bad protesters, those who will, they'll say violent. But of course, most of these, not most of them, I haven't really heard of any of the demonstrations against police that we're talking about result in the killing of people, except by the police themselves, because we saw a lot of that, the militarized police throughout the country. And then even one of them, if you remember, they went as far as to even assassinate somebody. And I don't think it was just one person, but there's one notable person whose name escapes me last summer. It was a white guy who was standing up, and he did something to intervene in a situation in Kenosha, Wisconsin. It was in Kenosha, Wisconsin. And then they had a warrant out for his arrest. And instead of him being arrested, he was assassinated sitting on his doorsteps by the police. They drove up with a whole bunch of police and then claimed I don't know what they claimed. They said he had a weapon or whatever. He just had his cell phone, and they killed him. And so basically, instead of responding with the type of, whatever type of measures would rein in the police force and police for their brutality and whatnot, they will militarize them and to make sure that the kind of changes don't come in society that would be more beneficial for the people.
How does that impact the society? I mean, does it make us more fearful? Is this designed? Is there a design to this? Is there a method to this to make people less willing to protest, more afraid, more compliant, if you will? Your thoughts?
I don't think it would make. I mean, it's shown that it hasn't stopped people from protesting. I don't think that's what happens. I think oppression breeds resistance.
I mean, is that the design?
Is that the purpose?
To kind of break you down.
Well, I mean, I don't know if they're actually, they do use it for intimidation. I mean, obviously, when they go through the streets with, military, military type weaponry, when they park them and have little stations with the armored vehicles and things like that, and then they, have the police with this, the gear, the helmets, and there's an intimidation factor to it. Ultimately, is to just keep people, in line. So I guess it does, have the intent is there to use it to intimidate people. I don't think it can be very effective because people will still stand up regardless. That's just naturally what people do. And so I don't, I don't see it as being very effective in terms of achieving the intimidation to the extent of stopping people from resisting, stopping people from calling out and going to the streets.
Well, Netfa, how does this impact our everyday lives? When we find out, and Brad, I'm going to get to you and all callers. Call us at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. I want to hear from you, Minneapolis, St. Paul. I want to hear from you, Madison, Wisconsin, and Milwaukee. I want to hear from you all over the country, and San Jose, Lydia, Bob, everybody, Shirley from Philadelphia. I want to hear from you because I want to know how this impacts your neighborhood because okay, Andrew Brown, this was like some low level offense. The SWAT team rolled into the neighborhood, Netfa. They rolled in. And then when you have a knife fight, okay, they say you don't bring a knife to a gunfight, but do you have to bring a gun to a knife fight? With Makia Bryant, did you really have to have did he have to shoot her 4 times? A military trained marksman? Mm? I mean, how is that impacting how we live on the ground from day to day? Because it just seems like we're over policed now, right? Or am I wrong?
Right. We even know. No, you're right. I mean, clearly, and I think they've done studies that show the impact of a militarized police. So obviously, you give people a bunch of these types of this equipment and these weapons because there's also a lot of surveillance weapons and things like that. They're going to use them, so they're going to put them to the test. They're not just going to sit them in warehouses or anything like that. And it shows under even the Biden administration. I know a lot of people want to talk about Trump and his overt support for the police, but the system in the state supports the police. And this first quarter of the Biden administration presidency, the transfer of military equipment has increased. And it's higher in this first quarter than any other quarter prior to in the prior administration in terms of the transfer just of the equipment. And so, the police are emboldened by these, and then they also want to put them to use. People are apt to want to get this equipment and try it out and do all the adventurous things that they've seen maybe on television or whatnot, or that they've even experienced if they were in the military, because we do talk about the military people being, their jobs going to the police. So it definitely it puts us in danger and emboldens the police to try to use these things, try them out. And then, of course, makes it more likely that some sort of fatal issue will come as a result.
We're talking with Netfa Freeman from the Institute for Policy Studies, the Black Alliance for Peace. We're talking about the militarization of the police. How is that impacting us when we have really domestic disputes or neighborhood issues? Does a SWAT team need to come in? How is that impacting us? How does that shape you? I have to tell you, in 1992, I was in Los Angeles during the uprising after the verdict had been returned in the Rodney King case. And I was on Crenshaw Boulevard. That's where Stevie Wonder has his radio station, KJLH, kindness, joy, love, and happiness. We love you, Stevie Wonder. And he had turned the radio station really into a place of peace. So he was bringing people, everybody he knew, who would come in and give words of peace and try to calm the neighborhood down and really quell people's fears. At dusk, you saw those tanks roll down Crenshaw Boulevard, but guess what? It didn't stop there. You saw it going down Wilshire Boulevard, Beverly Hills. I mean, it was just mind-blowing, Netfa, to see these military tanks. And you know what I did? I have to tell you. And I'm not someone I am very sensitive, but I burst into tears Because I've been out of the country a lot. I've even lived out of the United States from time to time, and it was painful. I said, "Wow, it could happen here." We could. This is when you look at the military overthrow of a government and go, "Wow, this it wouldn't happen in the United States." Oh, but it could happen here. Let me go to Brad from Elk Grove. Brad, what's on your mind?
Well, you're talking about the militarization of police. Why isn't there some call from the Democrats to make public the rules of engagement? The military has that, and I think the police in America should be forced, however unwillingly, to publish and follow certain rules of engagement, because you find the mindset of an occupying force and you find this idea of martial law being used in peacetime. I mean, what happened in North Carolina? What happened in Minneapolis? This is martial law tactics. And, I think that should be a call on, put it out there so everybody knows what your rules of engagement are and make the police follow those. And I'll take my answer off air.
Well, before you go, Brad, I mean, you bring up something really, really important. Stay right there, Netfa, because he's bringing up martial law. He's bringing out how this is. Correct me if I'm wrong, Brad. I mean, it's like our whole culture is getting militarized. I mean, a civilian-run government.
If
right?
they have that, get the rules of engagement out there so everybody knows what. Show me what you're working with. Don't just pull it on me as a surprise. Because that's what's happening to African Americans and people of color.
Absolutely, and eventually, trust me, Brad, it's going to happen to white people. It's coming. It's coming. It's coming. It's here.
Sure it is.
It's
and if every freedom, if everyone doesn't have freedom, nobody has.
Well, now that's mature. Netfa, why don't you respond to Brad? Thank you, Brad.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very good point that the call has, and I think we should already consider that it's happening to everyone. I mean, the last summer, those uprisings had a lot of different people. It was, largely black people led, but it was a lot of people in solidarity with what was happening. And so when they deployed the militarized police to address these things, they didn't pick and choose. And like I just said, they assassinated one young white man for his solidarity, actions putting his body in the way to lend itself. But I think also the term occupying force is appropriate, and we have to look at a more historical analysis to understand that as black people in this country and also indigenous people, we don't often mention the indigenous people, or what people refer to as the Native Americans, that the police were founded under, the auspices of trying to maintain and control. Their earliest antecedents, maintain and control these populations. The earliest antecedents are the slave patrols in the South. This is the earliest forms of the police in the United States, and so they are to put down insurrections and find escaped enslaved people who escaped, and those sort of things. And then the North, maybe about 100 years later, the private security agencies that were hired by capitalists to look over, to protect the warehouses and put down strikes and that sort of things. These are the two things that evolved into what we know as the police now. The public institution, the extension of the state, is the police, and their central role and function to maintain the control of the colonized and disaffected people in terms of the working class, black and brown people, and to maintain capitalism, the capitalist order, private property and whatnot. And that's what's being threatened. If you think about just this year alone, the pandemic has exposed the inadequacies of capitalism, and that there was a lot of wildcat strikes. We didn't hear a lot about them, but there was wildcat strikes and things, particularly just before George Floyd was killed. And so the militarized police, it's very appropriate that we're talking about referring to it as an occupation force, because that's what it is, and it shouldn't be divorced from the same sort of hegemonic foreign policy that the United States employs around the world. So, right now they're all over the place, militarizing 800 military bases around the world, and a lot of places they really have no business being at all, and to militarize these places. And then militarization and the defense industry has become a big moneymaker. And so, they have to, in order for those industries to continue to make money, the weaponry and the things that are produced have to be used, and so they have to, so it's production and then profit making off of militarization and war is used both domestically and foreign policy, internationally. And so what the police, and when we think about what the police do in this country, are exactly the same role of what the army and the military do in other countries. They're to enforce the hegemony of white supremacist, capitalist, patriarchal power.
What about community control over police? This is something that you have been arguing for quite some time. First of all, what is the community control over police? What does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
What does it look like?
Mm-hmm. And I should complete my answer about the other thing, because what the caller mentioned about the a use of force thing. Well, in Black Alliance for Peace, we call for the abolishing of the 1033 program. That's the program that transfers the military equipment to the police officers as part of the National Defense Authorization Act. It needs to be abolished, and the Democrats had not just the Democrats, but the House, the Congress, and the Senate had a chance to do it in 2013 under the Grayson Amendment, but they didn't do it. So now they're calling for it to be done. I guess that's good. That's what we want. But we need to, they're actually calling for it to be rolled back or something, but the demilitarization, but we're calling for it to be abolished. And then the community control of the police, I think, this is really the only, what we need is a shift in power, as I mentioned. So if the powers that be, their issue is trying to maintain power and dominance over colonized people, domestic colonized people, and otherwise, then the solution is to shift the power so that we have democratic control over the institutions that govern our lives. So community control of the police, which is not Pan-African Community Action as a campaign, but also a number of organizations across the country led by the formation, in fact, in a lot of them in Chicago, the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression. There's a Chicago chapter, Chicago Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, has community control of the police, and whereby the community should be having control. That means the hiring, the firing, the budget, setting what the actual priorities are, and the priorities and policies of the duties of the police. So everything that has to do with police should be under a democratic control of the communities in which they are, where the police are, instead of under the control of politicians, who are invariably in this country under the control of rich people and capitalists. So that the priorities aren't good. For example, if we, the community could have such that the priorities would be if a public safety or a community control officer would not be going and arresting someone who's, defecating or something, or urinating in the street. They might say, well, we're not going to criminalize that behavior. We're going to find out what's wrong with this person. Do they need medical attention? Do they need, why can't they find another place, instead of jamming that person up and maybe even physically assaulting them, saying, well, you're breaking the law. And, so in other words, these are, instead of worrying about, a building that's being, assaulted by the excrement, we're going to do something else. We're going to prioritize that person's well-being and safety. So these are the kind of things that community control of the police would be able to affect. It really is a question of democracy, and it's a question of the people who are most directly impacted by the brutality of the police being able to actually change, re-envision, and reestablish that in such a way that it benefits it's really a force to protect and serve the people versus, that being some, public relations slogan.
Would it be helpful if the police lived in the neighborhoods that they served? I mean, which would also go to the affordability of housing, which is, I think what is the average American house now, more than $300,000, which is, wow, it's a lot. Which, on those salaries, you can't really afford that. I mean, would that be helpful for the police to know the people they are policing?
That's definitely a problem in most of these places across the country. A lot of the police just don't. They're not part of the community, and it's easier for them to see the people in the community as sort of enemy combatants. Basically, is how they're trained. But one of the things community control of police would do would to make that be one of the qualifications for hiring a police officer. If you're in the community and you're or whatever you want to call it, they might not even call it police by the time if it's under their control. We're talking about them even having control over the budget, so it even has implications for the calls we see for defunding the police, and a lot of people who say the defunding as a prelude to abolishing the police. If we're leaving, in other words, we're taking control of that aspect. If the allocations of, if the budget is under the control of the community, then they can even decide, well, we're going to use this part of it, a certain part of it, for these other what might identify as preventative measures to intercommunal violence or something, and then leave the rest for officers for public safety or something like that. But as they're identifying qualifications
1 minute
for being, an officer under the community-controlled police, one of them would be, and most likely they would be, of course, communities would say, we want people who live here. We don't want, and they would identify who those people are. I've even imagined, before we used to talk about this, I forgot, we used to imagine, okay, sometimes people might think this is outlandish, what we refer to as returning citizens, people who were formerly incarcerated, coming back into the community.
30.
And we know that it's happened. A lot of people who want to give back, and they have experience and kind of maybe even be able to relate to some of the young people who might need some guidance, and that they could be hired in some capacity to do 15. Some of the preventative work, not waiting for something, because police usually they come after the fact.
10.
They're not really solving crime, and that these people will be put in a position and get all you need to actually start working on some of the issues that that are emerging out of our most impoverished communities.
Absolutely.
That would start preventing and alleviating some of this.
Netfa Freeman, everybody, Institute for Policy Studies, the Black Alliance for Peace, everybody, and the Pan-African Community Action in Washington, D.C., giving us some really, really creative ideas, some different thoughts about policing. Can't wait to have you back, Netfa. Blessings to you.
Thank you.
Let's talk about the president's address at the top of the hour, everybody. I'm going to answer your questions off air, Tony. Back in just a minute. Can you stay with me for a hot second, Netfa?
Yes.
Okay, because I wanted to, if you don't mind, let me go to Tony from O'Hare.
Okay.
Call. Tony?
Hi, Santita. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, sweetie. It's wonderful hearing your voice. I've missed you. I only have a couple minutes because I've got to do a hard switch, but I still have Mr. Freeman here, and I wanted him to hear your comment or your question.
Oh, no problem. I was actually going to make a comment about what Brad was calling about earlier, about the police disclosing their information about the rules of engagement. And it's funny because it had an inkling to what you just said about it, making sure that the police live in the community. Because think about this, for an example. We trust our military. Would we trust our military if these weren't American citizens that were in our military? You want them to be Americans to be fighting for us, so you want our police to be fighting for their own community if they live in. But I did want to mention the fact that Brad's saying that you disclose the rules of engagement because, like, the police are just going to disclose what's working out the favor for the citizen. But the thing is that everything the system's set up for the police. The first time the system actually faltered here recently was when George Floyd Derek Chauvin was actually found guilty because the system's been set up so much that like what happened in Lexington, Kentucky. It's the exact same victim. What do they call it? The cause of death was the exact same.
We have Attorney Patillo.
Okay.
There was no body cam footage, and we've gotten away with it. So that's all I really wanted to say. So thank you for letting me share that.
Of course. I just wish I could have gotten you on the air, but we were trying to get a lot in. But I heard Tony from O'Hare had missed my guy. It's wonderful hearing your voice, Tony.
Oh, well, thanks, sweetheart. My schedule's been really hectic with this last winter, so I haven't been able to call in. And but I still listen to you on the regular. If not,
But I miss hearing your voice. I miss hearing your voice,
Oh, you're
Tony.
such a sweetheart.
That's right. I said, my Tony from O'Hare. Wait a minute. Yeah. You make me blush when you call.
Oh,
Bless
well,
your
thanks.
heart. Thank you, sweetie.
Well, thanks. Well,
We have Mr. Narekis.
and so I'll just keep listening.
Thank you, sweetie. It's wonderful hearing your voice. I appreciate your
Thank you.
support. And Netfa, thank you so
All right,
much. I can't wait to have you back.
Thank you.
And
Okay.
we've got a lot. There's a lot going on.
Right.
The Justice and Policing Act. I mean, I didn't get a chance to even get to you with that. But wow.
I know about that.
Oh no, but
Thank you
you'll be
for
back.
having me.
Oh please, you don't have to thank me.
Okay.
I'm glad you came. Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for
All
coming
right,
on a
thank
little
you.
early. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you.
Blessings
Talk
to you, of course. Bye bye.
Yeah.
Mr. Narekis,
Hi,
how are you?
I'm doing well.
Hey, it's good hearing
I
your
had my
voice.
second shot yesterday.
Oh, you did? Bless your heart. How you feeling?
I'm doing pretty well.
Okay, good.
It was a little, I felt a little flu-ish, but not really, not really sick, but just kind of like, am I coming down with something? But I knew that I was not coming down with something. I was coming up with something.
Well, you know what? I think it hits different people different ways, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Because one of my brothers, after his second shot, he had a tough 3 days.
Yeah.
And he said, but now, I mean, he said, after these 3 days, he said I was okay. But boy, he said those first 3 days, whew.
Yeah.
I said, okay.
And other people don't notice it. Like it's not a thing.
Well, and then some other people have, some pretty strong reactions. So, I think there's no medicine on earth that is one size fits all.
Right.
None. I mean, every medicine, and we never do. Certainly, I'm almost guilty of that. You don't read the box that gives you the fine print.
Mm-hmm.
And you really should, or you certainly need to ask your doctor, because sometimes your doctor doesn't know. But I'm glad that you're doing well. I am so glad that you're doing well. And just stay masked up.
Yep.
Thank you. Please stay masked. And do we have Robert Patillo?
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Do we still have Mr. Freeman still on?
No, he dropped.
Okay, very good. Okay. I just want to make sure that we have those. Okay. So I'm so glad both of you are with us today because it would I want to hear your impressions of this speech. I want to hear your and more than that of the programs. I think that's the real that's the key here, the programs. The money that's got to go out. Was this Johnsonian? Was this Rooseveltian? Ugh. Was this expected? And what is the media doing with what he said? Jim, there's no better media educator. Of course, this is Jim Narekis from FAIR, Robert Patillo, Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting. I love them. Love them.
Oh, wow, that's outstanding.
Oh, look.
Thank you.
I always want to get clear. Did I just see what I saw? That's why I read FAIR every day. Oh, he and Janine Jackson, you all do such magnificent work. Thank you so much for all that you do. And of course, this is Robert Patillo, brilliant. He is the Southeastern Regional Director for Rainbow Push, brilliant civil rights lawyer. And he hosts his own radio show. And you should be on it sometime.
1 minute.
Of course, I'm putting you on there, like I have the power to do that. I do not. But of course, he is on the iconic. Well, Hey, I'm saving you the breath of asking for his information. But he's on the iconic Black Talk radio station in Atlanta. It's a huge station, WAOK. And he has a magnificent show every Sunday from 1 to 3, your time, Eastern time. And they talk about everything. And I love the breadth and the depth. You know, ideologically, people are all over the spectrum, and he's created a wonderful space for them to really share their views. So I'm so glad that you all can be connected today. So stand by, everybody.
15. 10. 5.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It's Thursday, April 29th, 2021. WCPT 820 in Chicago and AM 950 Radio, Minneapolis, St. Paul, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Call us at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. GWC Injury Lawyers gives you the opportunity to text to that number. I want to hear from you today. What did you think of the president's speech? What did you think of Senator Tim Scott's response? What did you think of not just the speech, but what was in the speech? What he is ambitious to do? Is it meeting your needs? I want to talk with you about that. So call me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. We've got a tremendous panel. Of course, Dr. Max Wolf will be with us at the bottom of the hour to talk about the money. You got to know about the money. And Jim Narekas from Fairness and Accuracy Reporting. And, of course, Attorney Robert Patillo will be talking to us about what their impressions were of this speech and of these programs. So let's get to some of these headlines so we can get right to these people. Chicago, showers today, a high of 57 degrees. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 64 degrees. Partly cloudy. The NASDAQ closed down 39 points. The Dow closed down 164 points. And the S&P 500 closed down 3 points. In Major League Baseball, the Twins, 10-2 over Cleveland. And today, the White Sox will face off against the Detroit Tigers. Atlanta shut out the Cubs yesterday, 10-0. Perhaps the Cubs will redeem themselves when they play Atlanta today, everybody. The president spoke last night before a joint House of Congress. 1,600 people are generally there, but because of COVID-19 restrictions, only 200 people were there, but it was still an historic night. For the first time, we saw 2 women behind him, the Vice President of the United States, the head of the U.S. Senate, and the Speaker of the House, really the head of the legislative branch of government, Nancy Pelosi, Speaker Pelosi. First time in history that we have seen that. Wow. President Biden delivered his first address before this joint House on the 99th day that he's been in office. Today it's his 100th day. What did he talk about? Well, in this politically divisive environment, he made no apology for passing the massive coronavirus relief bill without Republican support. He called on legislators to act swiftly on his other legislative actions, like police reform, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. What about his infrastructure bills? He's calling on them to help rebuild America and talked about our international challenges. That is to say, we've got to become internationally competitive. Are we staying competitive with the rest of the world? Wow. It's not just green energy, education, all of that. All of that was in the speech last night. And so I want to know what you think about that. Are we on the right track, everybody? Coronavirus, the European Union has agreed to buy 1.8 billion doses of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. If the deal is finalized, it will be the world's biggest single deal for a COVID-19 vaccine. In the meantime, in India, the government has bought at least 205 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines, making the country one of the world's top 10 vaccine buyers. Of course, more than 200,000 people have expired. This is like the second most populous country in the world, but losing one person is just one person too much. Federal prosecutors indicted the 3 men accused of killing Ahmaud Arbery last year on hate crime and attempted Kidnapping charges. 25-year-old black man was just out for a jog in Brunswick, Georgia in early 2020. His killing was one of the most painful incidents that triggered the marches last year. Of course, that and Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, everybody. And in Chicago, new body cam footage has been released showing the fatal killing of Anthony Alvarez, yet another one. Goodness gracious, everybody, as he ran from an officer on March 31st. This incident, along with the police shooting of this 13-year-old child, has prompted Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot to call for reform of foot pursuit policies, everybody. Got a lot to talk about. Let's talk about President Biden's speech to Congress. What did he talk about? He talked about this historic evening for women in government. He talked about jobs. He talked about big government. Wow. In 1996, President Bill Clinton said this was the end of the era of big government. Well, it seems like it is back. So, but what was said and what has been communicated about what President Joseph Biden has said? Did he have a Johnsonian night like LBJ, a Rooseveltian night like FDR? What was it? Let's get beyond the headlines. Let's get beyond what the talking heads are telling you, and let's just kind of look at what we're looking at. We've got Jim Narakis coming back with us, of course, from Fairness and Accuracy Reporting. It's always a pleasure to have him, and of course, Attorney Robert Patillo, civil rights lawyer, of course, the director of the Southeastern Regional Offices of Rainbow Push, and host of his own radio show, WAOK's, every Sunday from 1 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Jim Narakis, what did you see last night?
Well, I was struck by some of the things that Joe Biden said that no president has ever said before, and I have seen very little remarking on some of these remarkable things that were said. One thing that jumped out at me was when he said white supremacy is terrorism.
Why was that striking to you?
It is traditionally the terrorism has been defined as what foreigners are doing to us. You know, it's very much an us versus them thing, and there's been a real avoidance of talking about what has long been the major threat of political violence, which is far-right white supremacist attacks. Those are the things that since 9/11 have been the things that actually kill people in the United States, and it's been kind of a certainly taboo topic in the media, and something that the presidents have the Republican presidents have increasingly been trying to milk white supremacy for political gain, and Democratic presidents have been, I think, afraid of addressing it directly because you're talking about an ideology that valorizes the majority of people in the United States and treats them as a special breed that rules by right of their whiteness. This is been kind of a third rail of discussing our society. Facing the fact that the ideology of equality that is in the Declaration of Independence has from the beginning been perverted by the idea that some people are more equal than others, and so for Biden to come out and say white supremacy is terrorism, which is to say white supremacy is not a legitimate part of our political discussion, our political culture, and this is at a time when the far right in Congress is organizing a white nationalist caucus, to represent what they call the Anglo-Saxon political tradition. So it is I think a startling moment and a remarkable moment that has not gotten the attention that it deserves. Another moment was when Biden said, transgender youth, the president of the United States has your back. No president's ever said that before. It was, not so long ago, it was considered sort of a joke to support the rights of transgender people. And I think I believe that is something that will be very meaningful to a lot of transgender kids who face disapproval from maybe their family, their community. They're being used as a political pawn by the Republican Party, which is introducing anti transgender kid bills across in states across the country. And so for the president of the United States to say, no, I'm on your side. He said that they had tremendous courage. I think that's very meaningful, and has not gotten, as far as I can see, a lot of attention in the commentary that we've seen after the speech.
Robert Patillo, your thoughts?
Well, it struck me last night just how big the Biden agenda is and how small the Republican response has been to it. Joe Biden finds himself as being very much an LBJ type of president, a functionary president. Obama got to have the big soaring rhetoric, the fierce urgency of now, hope you can believe in, those sorts of things. Biden comes in more as a blue collar, blue collar Joe, as he likes to call himself. Saying that we're going to do things like finally pass an immigration bill, or work on the southern border, work on health care reform that actually penetrates and can be permanent, huge jobs and infrastructure bill, environmental regulations, those sorts of things. And then the Republican response being, well, why are they wearing masks inside? What about cancel culture? People on the internet are mean to me. President Trump putting out a letter earlier this week because he can't tweet, criticizing the Oscars and saying that their ratings were low. Just how small the Republican response is to big agenda items. And the reason is that the majority of the American people are on board with a big agenda. Very few people are saying, no, I want a small, ineffective government. People realized after 2020 the importance of having a big functional government that can distribute vaccines, that can stop massive pandemics from killing a half million people in the country. We all realize we drive down any street in this country, we need an infrastructure bill. If you go to an airport in America and fly to Abu Dhabi or fly to Taiwan or fly to Tokyo, you realize we need to tear all these things down. I don't understand how we even get in these ramshackles and feel safe. So President Biden has a big agenda, and Republicans have such a small response that it's going to be interesting seeing the soul searching that has to go on as they try to find a political rudder to go forward, because they have nothing really to attack now. So they have to switch to culture war issues, these wedge political issues, transgender teams playing girls' sports. The 2 times a year that happens, they turn this into the biggest issue in America. Whether or not vaccinated people should still wear masks and socially distance. They turn that into a governmental control issue. And as we just said, they are so concerned about upholding Anglo-Saxon traditions and values, they forget everything that happened after 1066. No Battle of Hastings, no William the Bastard or anything. They still think we're in the Doom Law or something along those lines. So it's nonsense, and they're going to have to figure out what they're actually trying to talk about.
Well, yes, those Anglo-Saxon traditions, they are a little violent, aren't they? Oh, my goodness. Well, I mean, come on, Jim. I mean, there's no context here. Or at least maybe they don't think that, well, we're not all like Robert, because Robert knows everything, okay? He studies everything, and he retains it. That's what's important.
if you want me to talk about the Viking of Stamford Bridge or the Battle of Hastings, I can give you a step-by-step account.
See what I'm saying? I love it. But with that having been said, he did go into these areas. I was wondering from you both, was this and thank you, Robert, for going there. Johnsonian, Rooseveltian. It seems to me that he's meeting the moment, Jim Marakis.
Well, one of the things I felt was not talked about much was the limits on what Biden can do based on our dysfunctional political system. And I'm thinking primarily of the filibuster, which is a rule that allows 41 senators who represent a tiny fraction of the United States, can block any bill, or just about any bill, and prevent, there was a lot of legislation that Biden talked about and urged Congress to pass, and chances are they won't pass any of it because they need 60 votes in a deeply polarized Senate to pass them. I assume that Mitch McConnell continues his belief that his most important job is making sure that the Democratic president is a failure. So he's not going to be.
Or was that specific to Obama? I mean,
that's what he said. But the logic of his party will benefit if the opposition president is perceived as a failure, and therefore we should do everything we can to make the president a failure. That is the logic that the Republican Party has embraced. I was the thing that jumped out at me in Tim Scott's speech was when he talked about how under Trump the COVID relief bills were bipartisan, and Democrats voted for them. And then Biden put forward a COVID relief bill, and Republicans refused to vote for it. And that shows how partisan Biden is, not how partisan the Republicans are. Because of course, if it had been a bipartisan bill like Trump, if Biden had showed the bipartisanship that Trump demonstrated, then we definitely would have, the Republicans would have jumped on that. When you have a system that allows a minority to block any action, and a party that has decided that failure, that national failure is in its interest, it's a recipe for disaster. And I don't think that was really like it's kind of an elephant in the room that we don't want to talk about.
Oh, I think we do. I mean, and I think that he put enough things on the table with respect to China. I mean, he was not talking to China as a subordinate. They were looking at each other eyeball to eyeball. And that's a big, big deal, everybody. It's no longer a unipolar world, everybody. There are a lot of people who have skin in the game. Let me go to Ron from Naperville. Ron, what's on your mind?
Hi, Santita.
Hi.
I caught a portion of Joe's address, and I think Joe is the right term. He is the average Joe, as much as we want to think the president's this superhuman creature. But he made a comment that almost made me fall off the sofa. He said he wanted to find a path for citizenship for the farmers who feed us in this time. Maybe I'm adding more, embellishing it, but basically, we pay $2.50 for a pound of strawberries. No white guy, even no black person, is going to pick us a pound of strawberries for $2.50. That's crazy talk. It's illegal immigrants, quote unquote, who are giving us food, who are nourishing our bodies. And we need to recognize that immigration is why we're all here. Some forced immigration, and I apologize for saying it that way, and some because this was the place that you had to get the hell away from your home, and this was the only place that was willing to accept us. And, by hook or by crook, we're here. We really have to recognize that just because we're here, it doesn't mean no one else can come. And I think that is one of the biggest things that if it happens on his watch, I will fall over dead and be happy with that.
Well, don't fall over
That'd
dead.
be amazing.
No, don't fall over dead.
No, I don't.
No, I got you. Be happy.
But I could say that we're complete.
Well, jump
or
up.
At least we're on a path to
on our
success.
way. Jump up in ecstasy, but don't fall over dead. I need you, Ron.
Yeah,
And, but
no,
forced immigration, I will just say this. If black people did not come here, this was not forced immigration. We were sold here. And I think that, no, but we've got to be very specific about that because and we arrived on lands that have been stolen. We've got to be very specific. That will help. That will help you. That will help your lift into the sky when you jump up in ecstasy. So, but I've got like a minute and a half left for Jim and for Robert. A minute and a half belongs to you, Jim.
Yeah, the focus on China was maybe my least favorite part of the speech. To present the 21st century as a competition between the United States and China, and the implication is that one has to lose for the other to win. The fact is, China's economy is now bigger than the United States' in terms of what it can actually buy in real terms. Their population is what 4 times our size. They are going to be producing many of the innovations of the 21st century just by the scale of their economy, and to think in terms of like we have to wall off the United States so that China can't steal our intellectual property is also walling off the United States from the innovations that China and other countries are going to be producing in the 21st century. And I think it's self-defeating.
Wow. I mean, wow. Robert, your final thoughts?
We now propose the big agenda. We see the American people support a big agenda. We understand that America will be rebuilt by a big agenda. Now we have to pass a big agenda.
Amen to that. I mean, and to think that, wow, there are other people in the world beyond the United States. We're going to have to make that adjustment, everybody. And you know what? You bring up a great point, Jim Nareka's Fairness and Accuracy Reporting. I urge you to go to fair.org. You've got to. They have the greatest articles, greatest overviews. But Lonnie Grenier, who was nominated to be an assistant attorney general, she couldn't get through because I guess her thoughts were just so forward. She said, we have to grow up in our politics. We have to go beyond I win, you lose. You lose, right. I win.
30.
We need to all win, everybody. Thank you for that, Jim. Thank you for that. Everybody has to win. My parents have 5 kids. They had to figure out for everybody to get skin in the game. Okay?
Right.
I'm with that. Jim Nareka's Fairness and Accuracy Reporting. And of course, we've got Robert Patillo, who's with us almost every day. He's the director of the Rainbow Push Project in Atlanta, Southeastern Regional Director. Can't wait to be with you all again very soon. Talking to Dr. Wolf about the money that was discussed last night by President Biden. Back in just a minute. Thank you, Jim Narekas. And thank you, Robert
so much.
Patillo. Oh, please, I love having you. You know that.
Thank you. I enjoy being on.
Oh, please, can't wait to have you back.
Thanks for calling me.
Always. Please. I'm always going to call you. I just don't want to bug you. But, I don't mind. Excuse me. I am a producer. I will bug. Oh, I hate to do that. But I will. I will.
I'm married to a radio producer.
I know. And I love her. She's such a jewel. We love her.
Yeah.
We love her. You all do great work. Thank you so much for all that you do.
Thank you.
Of course. Blessings to you.
Good.
Thank you, Robert. Excuse me. Oh. Okay. Let me do this. Hey, do we have Dr. Wolf on?
We have Dr. Wolf now.
Good morning.
Hi, Dr. Wolf. How are you?
Not bad. How are you?
Oh, got a few jobs here.
Uh-oh.
Oh, yeah. But it is what it is. I've got to run off the air today. My father's got to do excuse me,
Getting the headphones on correctly.
oh, let me put mine back on. Got to get him on an event, and I need to go and make sure that he sounds right. You know. So there we go. In addition to these other things I've got to do today.
Sounds like a full agenda. But I'm sure it's true.
I promise you it is. I've been doing a lot of that lately because he's got we've had to change up his therapy schedule. And that's been a lot.
I saw him on TV at the verdict, the Chauvin or Chavin verdict.
Yeah. And that's been we didn't want him to go there because he had just really finished this round of therapy. You know.
But he did look a touch disoriented as a friend. I wouldn't say that to anyone else.
Well, we're on Facebook Live, but that's okay. The thing is, you know what? He now has the visible signs of Parkinson's. And
right.
it's something called the
You
mask.
can see the thoughtfulness in the eyes,
Uh-huh.
but he looked sort of like he wasn't sure where to stand. I mean, I wasn't sure if that's because of something new or because if I were him, I'd always not know where to stand because one doesn't know where to stand at an event like that, and everything is uncomfortable. So it's hard to parse the universal discomfort of the moment, I think, because sort of being relieved that things aren't worse doesn't last that long, right?
Yeah.
So you're in a room full of people who are relieved that something even worse didn't happen
1 minute
for a few seconds until they reflect on just how terrible what happened was. And I think that's hard to know what to do with your legs and your hands and your face and that. But he's good at being cryptic, right? It's a tough face to read.
Well, but now he's got the mask, which is which is a feature of Parkinsonism, where your facial muscles lock, so he doesn't have the range of expression in his face that he used to have.
So I thought you looked like he was concentrating so hard on being unreadable.
30.
Sorry, because you like the poker face, but I guess
now his face is locked. I mean, not all the time, but it's moving.
You got to get this guy into the World Series of Poker.
No, that's now where he is. But we're trying to help him do different things. But if he would just listen, bless his heart.
10.
So for those of you out there,
Probably easier said than done.
Oh,
5.
I think if you have a sort of a great figure in your life who's been as successful as he has by not doing what other people expected or thought, it's hard.
Absolutely.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. It's Thursday. It's half past the bottom of the hour. You know what time it is. It's Dr. Max Wolf time on the Santita Jackson Show on WCPT 820 in Chicago, AM 950 Radio, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Milwaukee, Madison, everywhere. And, of course, meeting my Santita Jackson Morning Stars over on Facebook on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. Please like and subscribe on my new YouTube channel, the Santita Jackson Show channel. Please do that. And of course, we're being carried on the WCPT's channel as well on Facebook, WCPT 820. Now, I want you to call me or text me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763 9278 GWC and G Lawyers gives you the opportunity to text to that number. Why do I want to hear from you. I want to know what you thought about the speech last night. It was so greatly anticipated. Really, in ordinary times, this would have happened really not even a month or so after the president had gotten in, but because of what happened at the Capitol and so much that's been up in the air, he had to wait almost 100 days in. This is his 100th day in office to give us really a state of the union, a state of where he wants to go. But this is a good thing. It's a good thing because we're now understanding why the infrastructure bills, plural, why they're there, and what he's looking for, the conversations that he's having with China. There's so much that came out. And let me come to you, Dr. Max Wolf, brilliant economist that you are. I don't even know where to begin. I know there were several takeaways. It was great to see these two women behind him, the head of the Senate, the head of the legislative branch of government, 2 women. That was great. Of course, Vice President Harris and Speaker Pelosi. But then we started looking at these trillions of dollars. Oh, wow. What'd you say, a million? for the first infrastructure. Then he wants to do
a million
billion
gives us $1 trillion.
It's unbelievable. That's right. Excuse me. I mean, talk to me. What was your takeaway?
Certainly this is large, but I think it's an interesting moment. I think we've seen conservatives talk about balanced budget almost exclusively when they're not in office, and then feel like there was no tax cut that wasn't worth the money, and so run up these enormous budget deficits and these huge national debts. And I'm not among the group who thinks that that's without some long-term harm, although I know it's popular to believe that now. But I think we're starting to see that, hey, if we're going to start mortgaging the future, let's get something good for it, and let's include the social programs that we've been cutting for 40 years as worthy. So I think that's a bit of a watershed. Now, clearly things proposed and things passed into law are not the same, right? So what gets proposed and what gets passed into law are usually related. So it's interesting, but they're not twins, right? So I think we do want to keep that, firmly in mind. But look, I think saying that infrastructure includes the people, their health, their education, their access to health care and affordable health care, their access to early childhood education, universal pre-K, their access to at least the first 2 years of college free of charge or some retraining, is actually us catching up with the rest of the developed world in ways that are really important to make this country less unequal and more humane. And I think it does in its own way come out of the Corona episode, which is unfortunately, not over as much as people would like it to be. But the savagery, the lack of infrastructure to help each other and help ourselves if we don't happen to be wealthy. If by random chance we're in the bottom 80%, 4 out of 5 people, then we kind of had nothing to offer you but go home and hope you don't die. And I think that's going to be a long time to repair that. So I do think this is reparative. I think it's somewhat bold. The usual big questions are what gets left on the cutting room floor and what gets made into law. And that's another chance to see the priorities and what gets fought for. But it was more bold and more progressive than I think most people thought. And other than the person standing up there delivering the message, it sounds a lot like Senators Warren or Sanders in some of its moments last night.
Why is he meeting the moment? I mean, this is someone who's politically savvy, someone who's really been a conservative Democrat. He's been at the center. He's a centrist. And yet he is from a state that is a corporate state. I mean, that's what they do. Delaware protects the corporations. They house them. And so is he meeting the moment, do you think? I mean, because he's a savvy politician. I mean, and that's no disrespect. You cannot be in this space 50 years and have just made this hard climb that this man has made. Tenacity. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, he's gotten to the vice president's office and now the president's office. And, despite what we'd like to believe, nobody gets there without doing whatever it takes, right? Because all the guys and all the gals competing against you, they'll do whatever it takes. So you don't. You have a great story about how you almost got there, right? And he got there. So, yeah, I personally believe, and this may be more controversial, may alienate some of your listeners or even you in some ways, I think history makes men. Men don't make history. I mean men in the old-fashioned sexist way. History makes people who they are. People don't make history. People like the idea that people are in charge because, hey, we're people. It sounds good. We'd all like to be a little bigger than we are, right? But philosophy and religion and spirituality tells us that, there's always a lot more and bigger than us moving around. And I think that people rise and fall to the occasion. And I believe that this country is in a very perilous moment. I think he's savvy enough and the folks around him are savvy enough to acknowledge that privately, if not publicly, and to try to move forward in a way that's reparative. I honestly believe that by persona and temperament, he has a reparative bend, at least at this moment in his life, right? And if you listen to stories about him as a person, there are lots of stories about a sea change after the loss of his son, right? And he's dealt with a lot of loss as a person. And I think America's dealt with a lot of loss. I think people keep not factoring that what people are doing out there, the ones you agree with and the ones you don't, are grieving while pretending they're not grieving. And we're all trying to live with a lot of deaths here. And a lot of disappointment about where our country is and what our country is capable of, what our fellow citizens are up to. and all those lives lost or cut short or mangled in the last year by the economy, by COVID, by the response to the two.
And so you're seeing someone who's had to make a lot of really hard, fast adjustments in his life in real time while working, right? And I
Yeah.
see that I see that manifesting politically. What
I think he
AOC.
held on to his compassion,
Yeah.
right? And America needs to hold on to her compassion, something fierce right now, because it's been in short supply.
What do you mean?
I mean, America's compassion is in short supply. And I think, to me, that's part of what you see with the overly violent policing, the willingness to lock so many people up for so long, the hard harshness about extending health care and benefits to people. We got focused on the country on how to make sure nobody gets a free hour of school or a free piece of cheese. That's not compassion. As my traditional understanding of the term would be, right? And when you're not the biggest, baddest thing in the neighborhood, compassion is pretty important. And one way or another, I think we're coming to the realization that the sort of screaming eagle version of America that people like, that maybe have been particularly out front and center in the Trump years, is not just not so desirable, it's just super inaccurate, right? It's the projection of a fading gangster in a bad neighborhood of his own creation, who now needs us all to get along, because that saunter is a limp.
What about the pushback from, I guess, just from people who just do not support his initiatives? They're saying it costs too much money. It's trillions of dollars. I mean, the counter to the $1.8 trillion infrastructure bill from the Republicans was $600 billion. I said, whoa, we are in a crisis. That's not a crisis budget. I mean, when the banks needed money, when Wall Street needed money, according to the Dodd-Frank overview, the forensics on that, they got more than $20 trillion. Do Americans deserve
I think
as
part
much?
of this debate, some of this debate on both sides is disingenuous.
Okay.
The Republican Party is running for the brand, which is we are low tax, low spend people, even though they're not. Okay? They do cut taxes, but they spend like drunken sailors, and they've largely been the principal bankrupter of the American balance sheet, just for the record, if anyone cares about the numbers. And the Democrats run on that we have to spend money to be a functional society, which of course is true, but it doesn't mean you have to deficit spend the money, right? It just means you have to be harder and harsher on your priorities if you're going to increase spending, but not to everybody, right? Or figure out how to do the taxes. So this is a little bit of a bipartisan branding game when everybody has been very comfortable running structural budget deficits since Reagan took us out of the green into the red. And with the exception of a few years under Clinton, no one ever looked back. Right? And I think the United States now has the sort of noblesse oblige problem of telling the world, you will loan to us because if we collapse, we take you down with it. So it's our debt, but it's your problem.
How is the world taking that?
Well, as you might imagine, ruffles some feathers. And there's probably some folks out there who tend to be a little bit longer-term minded. Being more long-term minded hasn't historically been a great strength of this young nation, right? So there are folks who are more long-term minded, and I think they see that as the opportunity for them to rise in the wake of the erosion of American dominance. Because ultimately, armies march on their stomach, and while a lot of people feel like that means something about having breakfast every day, it's actually a historical phrase about the ability to pay for an army. It's not so much about your nutrition routines.
Why do you think he made really China? Why did he put China so forward in his discussion last night? Why did he make the international such a centerpiece of this national discussion? And I realize everybody in the world is looking at the president when he speaks, but why China? Why the international aspects?
I think there's two things. I think America does suffer from a historical idea that it's exceptional and therefore can ignore the rest of the world. And that's always a bad idea. I always like to benchmark these conversations with, we are 4% of the world's population, 18 to 19% of the world's GDP and falling, which means 82% of everything economic is outside of here and 95% of everything human is outside of here. That's a lot to ignore. Right? That's a big myth if you forget all that. And we still think in terms of nation states, and politicians enjoy the distraction, but the economy is pretty global. And so the United States and China are not extricatable economies. They can be more and less integrated, right? But they're not extricatable. China is a huge part of our economy, and no doubt a big part of our future, possibly an even bigger part of our future than the past. And I think the more professional foreign policy crew that's in there now is trying to pick up pieces in the wake of, never mind the ideological stuff, just the pure incompetence of the Trump years, which is kind of staggering. Just the offices left empty, the diplomatic faux pas, the failings, the lunatic statements, the empty offices. It really was a catastrophic dysfunction on a basic level for confidence. So they're trying to articulate a position in the world that is viable, but that doesn't alienate an American public that has really turned on trade in a way without knowing much about it, but has really turned on trade and has turned on China in a way that I think is pretty obviously manifesting itself in horrifying racial attacks. So that has to be dealt with, right? So you have to be critical without going down this crazy blame and vilification and racialized road that, you know, unfortunately among his many misadventures, the former president was very interested in, you know, China flus and Wuhan flus and this idea that this is some kind of cabal by China, which seems to have manifested itself in some really, really grotesque acts of racial bias here.
We're talking with Dr. Max Wolf about President Biden's speech last night. What did you make of it? What were your takeaways? Were you struck by the two women behind him? I mean, that got a round of applause. We've never seen that in our history, although other nations have had women in leadership. We're new to this, and it's a good thing, but we're new to this. What about the jobs? What about these bills that he is trying to get passed that are costing trillions of dollars, Dr. Wolf? I mean, do we have $1 trillion
Remember, we did
problems?
spend trillions before. We spent trillions when we cut the corporate tax rate by 40% under Trump, and we spent trillions when we cut these tax rates, and we spent trillions on our military and our national defense and on our Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security. And then I'm not saying that those aren't things we should spend money on, right? All I'm saying is we spend trillions pretty quickly. I mean, again, not to be the sort of scolding economics professor here, but most Americans don't understand the following bizarrety. The U.S. government is the largest single spender of money in many regards on Earth. So the U.S. government spends about $4 trillion a year. Right? So that's $1,000 billion every quarter, or about $350 billion a month. Part of that money is spent talking about how small government is great and we don't need a big government, which is kind of insane. And it would be funny if it were more of a joke, right? But so spending trillions is the business of the government of the United States right now. And has been for as long as I can remember, or I've looked at the numbers. So it's been true quite a while. It's not new. It's not a Biden thing. It's not a Trump thing. It's not a George Bush thing. It's not a Barack Obama thing. It's an American thing for the last several generations, or the last generation or so. So spending trillions is the business of the U.S. government. Taxing trillions is also the business of the U.S. government. Taxing somewhere on the order of $500 billion or to $1 trillion less than you spend, i.e., running a deficit of about $1 trillion in the bad years and $500 billion in the good years, is unfortunately also the business of the U.S. government. So while these numbers are enormous, they are also commonplace. They are what the U.S. government does, and that's in part just because they're running a $20 trillion economy. So when you're running a $20 trillion economy and you're a really big part, you're the single biggest feature part of it, you're going to throw around a bunch of money, right? It's like if you go out to dinner with a whole bunch of NFL linemen, yeah, no one's just getting the side salad.
So do you think when the Republicans counter with counter $1.8 trillion, and that's just one of these bills, with $600 billion, what do you say? I mean, I'm asking you that question because I see the data, I see the statistics that come out every week, but I have to tell you, functionally, women have taken a hit. Black people have been slaughtered by this economy over the past, not just year, 10 years, 15, 20, say, let's go back 40 at least. But really over the past year, oh my gosh, we're the ones who lost these jobs and lost our lives. And we need help getting back on our feet, Dr. Wolf.
But you don't just need help. America needs you to succeed. And America has taken a hit. If that's brown America, white America, female America, male America, trans America, old America, young America, whatever. And whatever other categories I have callously forgotten about. Okay? America needs to be viable again. And two things happened in the coronavirus. Massive damage, but also massive exposure of how damaged things were before Corona. So I think we have to sort of lay both those assessments on the table if you're trying to do a reasonable long-term economic plan. You have to say, what did we learn about how fragile and damaged we were before Corona, in Corona, and what did Corona do to us before? Right? It's like a good primary care physician. They're not going to just be like, oh, what happens? You broke your finger. They're going to try to figure out why you've got, high blood pressure and why you're not, they're going to go through the whole thing, right? So part of it is we had a lot we needed to do and weren't doing before the first cough. Now, obviously, things are worse, right? And there have been some damage done, right? Yeah. But, there's another funny lesson sitting here that's going to have to get stumbled over at some point, which is to the extent we've had success, it's because we had a massive free public health rollout. And to the extent that we had a failure and led the world in infections and death for a year, which we largely did, okay, it's because we couldn't get our act together to have a central government policy. There is no other analysis of what happened. And so it strongly suggests that we need to start doing for the majority of people what they are not rich enough or able to do on their own. We need that central government to function. If it's going to be a sort of thought about a war against cancer, which was interesting, which was mentioned last night, or if it's going to be about leveling the playing field for young people so that they get some pre-K and some nutrition and some education, and so they don't start in first grade 3 years behind the other kids if they're poor, right? Or whether it's that you're going to get a chance to get more than a high school education in an economy where I don't know anyone who thinks that getting a high school education is enough anymore, except for the federal government. So maybe it's time they caught up with every other person who's not drunk or high who you've ever talked to about how far you need to go in school. Because I haven't bumped into anyone who told me, like, college, pish posh, son. You're going to do great with a college education, but you'll do more than fine with high school. Right? So if every single individual knew that wasn't enough, then maybe it's time that policy reflects that. Same with the grants, the Pell Grants and Staffords and the ways people who are not affluent get themselves through a pretty expensive college experience, right? Being a little bit more generous there. And even though it'll be super unpopular, arming the Internal Revenue Service with the tools, capability, and funding to go out and collect the taxes is another way to spend money that probably has good returns associated with it.
We're talking with Dr. Max Wolf, noted economist, about President Biden's speech last night, and more than that, the programs, because that's really what this is about. People were looking at the style and what was he going to say, how is he going to say it, all of that. But at the end of the day, he did come away talking about jobs. Unlike President Clinton in 1996, in which he said the era of big government is over, President Biden really demonstrated the opposite, Dr. Wolf. And
without a doubt.
Yeah, and so where are we going to go from here with that? Is that something, because you heard Senator Scott's response, which was, not the strongest response, but it was a very interesting response. As we're watching our voting rights diminish and all of that, as we are in the throes of the 2022 season already, the voting season, where Raphael Warnock's seat is up for contention. What do you think? What do you say to these people who are saying that, look, he's asking for too much money? This is government overreach. What do you say to that?
Well, if you want to get enough, you ask for too much. That's also, I think, known as politics, right? So I'm not sure that strategy is particularly flawed or creative or new, but sure. But you ask for what you need. And I think our political discussion has not caught up to the economic reality. The lesson of 2008, 2009 is you need the federal government to bail you out and to give you taxpayer money. True if you're a huge company, true if you're a medium-sized company, a small company, a special interest group, right? you need the government. That's what Citizens United is. It's giving wealthy and powerful interests the right to buy the government because it's so important. And we also did a big experiment, unfortunately, with what happens when most of the government's assistance flows to the top. And that was a massive upward redistribution into a country that already had a pretty problematic distribution of income, right? Exacerbating it. So politically, we talk about the government. I don't want the government. I hate the government. The government's too big. But this is coffee talk obsession, right? This is now a sort of political posturing that has almost no actual validity. It's like when people tell you that you need an assault rifle to go deer hunting, or 37 assault rifles to go deer hunting and bulletproof vest. Like, okay, if that's your thing, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure the deer don't shoot back.
Well,
so, look.
No, please go on, because I just simply want to say in these last couple of minutes before you go, my question for you is, you said, America is on the way back, are we? And on our way back to where?
Oh, we're not. I think we've arrested the rapid decline, right? So I think this patient has a heartbeat, right? And is hooked up to the machines and has a competent group of doctors in the room. And given the sort of flatline performance we've seen of late, that is a major improvement.
Oof. That doesn't make me feel great. But you said COVID-19, this pandemic, exposed our vulnerabilities. In about 90 seconds, where do we go from here? What can we do to get to where we ought to be?
I just think we need to have the honest conversations. A smaller bill means the tax cuts to these corporations are more important to one vision of the future of America. It's a reasonable vision. One vision, future of America, that these tax cuts, this money flowing to the most successful enterprises and individuals, is actually more important than trying to put a floor in for other people. That's a debate. Let's just have the debate. Okay? It's high time, and I think the public knows it. One. Two, the central government is the pivot supporting an extremely crisis-prone economy in a rough business cycle. And you can't just sort of pretend away the 2001 downturn, the 2008 downturn, and the 2020 downturn. We've had three massive structural craterings in 20 years. And the way you get through that is more help faster from the government.
1 minute.
Everyone wants a piece of the government action. And all that's happened is we've got a proposal to include the bottom 80% in a more meaningful way. And that may or may not be what the public chooses to do, but that's what's on the table.
It's on the table, everybody. Well, I need to be able to break it down for us. Oh, you know what? I'm going to get these. Dave, I'm going to get to you as soon as we get off the air, very quickly. But everybody think about that. And we all have to get down and get our hands, all hands on deck. Let me put it that way. Call your representatives, get these laws passed. Let's get this money flowing in the United States, and let's change our thinking. We all have skin in the game, and we all need some assistance.
15.
We have to grow beyond not just supporting corporations, but supporting people.
10.
Really. Supporting people. Think about that, everybody. I'm Santita Jackson on behalf of the Morning Stars and Paul and Dr. Wolf and everybody who was with us today. I'm Santita Jackson, WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota, and everybody else. I'm Santita Jackson. God bless you. Have a great day. Until tomorrow. Be blessed. Dr. Wolf.
Yes, madam. I hope you don't feel singled out about your giant assault rifle collection for your hunting trips.
No.
I wanted to use my one-liner that I kept thinking when I was watching this thing last night, which is, it looked like Donald Trump's inauguration up in there. By which I mean the largest crowd ever assembled.
You are terrible. See, you know what?
I just was upset that Rudy couldn't be there, but sadly he wasn't in prison.
Oh, my gosh. I mean, did they roll up on him or what? Oof.
But he's got such an ironclad senility defense. All they have to do is show him doing that weird thing in front of the used tractor supply store with the mascara running out of the top of his head. Like I don't know. I think that guy's done.
Oh, do you think he's going to go to jail?
No, I think he's going to. You almost do feel bad for him, right? Like it seems like the grip on kind of reality has kind of gone. right? I mean, he was just saying and doing the craziest of the crazy stuff.
Well, he did that as
And
a
like,
mayor.
all jokes aside,
Yeah.
doing that like in front of that used tractor store though, with the make it yourself notebook paper signs for Trump 20. I mean, like, geez, that was
Nuts. Okay.
yeah. It's like yeah, but it's also just totally it's the wrong month on the expiration date on the milk. Crazy.
It was crazy.
This guy's drinking cottage cheese in his coffee in the morning. I mean, like, that was bad.
It was crazy. It was crazy. It was crazy. The whole thing.
Yeah, I'm not talking about like I don't agree with something ideologically. Sure, I probably don't. But I mean, there's also just when you watch a person who's not, who's really struggling, let's say, and shouldn't actually be allowed by the people who care about him and the people around him to be just sort of conducting themselves like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the whole thing just, you know what? Let me tell you, the whole thing just makes me very sad. It just does. And you guys, I don't do Schadenfreude well. I don't worry in someone's downfall.
No, I'm not enjoying.
No. I was saying you. Sad, no, I was just saying. The whole thing made me sad. I was like, this man has got to be 80, and just the whole thing just made.
I
me
was
sad.
just shocked that he didn't still have naturally jet black hair. Because one does get that story often of elderly, potent elderly males who are naturally completely gray free at some sort of septuagenarian plus time range, and you always wonder, like, why are you telling me this? I mean, I guess it's possible. It seems incredibly far-fetched.
Sacha Baron Cohen's slapdown of this man. Sasha, shame on you.
I'm not. I mean, I don't think the quaff is the big problem with Rudy. Never did. Even in his better hair days. It is sad. I mean, this is a federal prosecutor, a mayor of America's largest city. Those are dignified posts, but I don't know.
I mean, that the whole thing was like, and they rolled up on Victoria Toensing, and they're like, no, but we don't want anything from you. I'm like, really? Come on, you guys, you all don't roll up, and they roll up at the same time. That's how the feds do it. Early in the morning, and they get everybody at the same time.
He did specialize in doing this with the cameras, by the way. That was his thing as prosecutor here.
Oh, yeah.
That's how he made his name. Right? That was his kind of special sauce.
He knew, but oof.
Yeah, which isn't to say he deserves it. He doesn't deserve it either, potentially. Although I think that sort of, I have the sense that he has basically boasted about the criminal act on video lots of times, and the co-conspirators are already in the federal system, which does make it probably easier for them to apply pressure. But I'm not an attorney, and I am not privy to any non-public details, and I haven't even been particularly conscientious about reading the public detail.
Well, I just thought it was sad, and I just said, well.
Agreed.
Yeah, the whole thing just made me very sad, because I hate bad news. I just do. I do. But it was what it was, and it is what it is. Everybody, because there you have it.
I mean, I think the choice last night too, from the response for the Republicans, the content was kind of, could have been written 11 years ago, but the choice of the spokesperson was kind of interesting, and it was well delivered by that spokesperson. It'd be interesting if they're going to try to make that particular senator the face of the new Republican reasonable response to Biden. That is an interesting strategic decision.
Oh, I don't know. It's just the whole thing. Sometimes, you give people credit where it's not due. Sometimes we think people are smarter than they really are. The whole thing just...
People do that to me all the time. That's the backstory of my career.
No.
I am often able to credibly fake my own mediocrity.
No, not at all. No. You're not mediocre. Or as some of the old folks that I know would say, mediocre.
Mediocre? Well, that's probably more kind of healthy than mediocre. I think okra is on its way to being a superfood, right?
Yes. Yes. And I love okra, by the way. I do.
Oh, it's good for you.
Oh, I love it. I'm trying to learn how to dehydrate it. There was this. I was at this fabulous restaurant in London about 4 or 5 years ago. I have to get the name of it. I mean, the prawns were the size of baseballs. I mean, these were like they were exquisite, and the food. I love Indian food anyway, and the food was exquisite. And they made this dish. Well, because they just do vegetables forever, and they made this dish, Max. And you're a great cook. With the that was very thinly sliced okra, and it was dehydrated, but then they put it back in this sauce. My mother and I almost
Interesting.
fell out. Yes, we walked out of the restaurant with doggy bags. Yes, we did. And were we headed back to the States the next day? Yes. And did I get some ice from the airport? And yes, I carried it on the plane.
Curried prawns cannot have been popular in the cabin with each other.
Well, no, not the prawns. I didn't. The prawns. I ate as much of those as I could. I'm limited. But this okra. Oh, and yes, I did eat it when I landed back in Chicago. Yes, I did. Oh,
You freaked out when I saw you plugging your microwave that you brought to carry out on the floor, heating up a bunch of curries on the plate. I think that's a grounds for the no-fly list.
The stewardesses, the flight attendants were so nice. I told them I shared some of it with them because they actually gave me a lot to bring back. And they were thanking me. Oh, this is so great. Next time I said, next time you go to London, go there. It's hard to get a reservation. And a couple of them went. I called the owner, and they were like, this food, the food was just exquisite. And I can't wait to travel again because I really want to go to this place. I really do. But I'm going to be in touch with you a little bit
if you're fully vaccinated, the Europeans will accept you, I think, starting in about a month.
Yeah, well, I won't be.
So, yeah.
But we will see. We will see.
Well, you could be in a month or two, right? It's still a possibility.
If it's still a possibility, I'm still waiting for them to work some things out. These clots did not make me feel great, but I've got to, I'm not a no, absolutely not. I'm just like a no for now. Let me you all work this out.
You could always take the Sputnik vaccine. That seems very safe.
No, not.
I thought it might be a bad sign that Brazil returned that in the midst of an absolutely horrifying super crisis.
Look, AstraZeneca changed their names. How dishonest can you be? So they can be rebranded? I mean, really, you have the same problems. Get out of here. So, they need to...
I still think that's probably a better bet than the Sputnik.
Honey, all of it. Would you just do the test, find out what the deal is so that we can all feel better? That's all I'm asking. Just do it.
Yeah. Just do it. The clotting does look like it's less than 1 in 1 million, and all female in a certain age group.
I don't believe that. They've been having problems with that vaccine since last fall, and that's a great talking point. It's a great PR point. They know that there's some other problems there. All of these shots serve as accelerants. I've been talking to a lot of different doctors and scientists about this. They serve as accelerants to whatever issue you've got, and that can happen. Be honest about it. And stop trying to move.
We don't know enough about Corona or any of these vaccines to be sure about anything.
That's right. True. But say that, and say, but this is what we know thus far. This is what we believe.
But my point is, everything we're learning about COVID is that it's worse than that initial doubt for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
And maybe the scarier truth is we don't know what our fellow men, women, and increasingly disturbingly children in India and Brazil, we don't know what the next 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years will be like for them, but we know there's a non-trivial risk that there'll be long fallout from this, at least obviously, hopefully not too many, but probably in millions of cases.
Absolutely. And I'm not denying any of that. I'm just saying, with all of that, and even then, the morbidity rate is very, very low. But who wants COVID? I've had friends who've had COVID, and unlike a lot of people, I've buried more than a few people who've had it. So this is something.
For sure. No, it's a dangerous business. I can't believe people don't just drink the bleach like the president told them. Be fine.
I can't believe that they won't let us talk about these other therapeutics that have been out here. Hydrochloroquine has worked for some people.
You don't mean bleach, though.
No, no, not bleach. But ivermectin, hydrochloroquine. A lot of people around the world, which say 95.5% of the world lives beyond our borders. Let's talk to them. Let's have an open discussion. about what is working, how people are being treated.
Well, there are some therapeutics that are pretty late in the pipeline, including the one from Pfizer for more sort of symptom management and control of the virus for folks who do end up contracting it, which are actually fairly promising as well.
They're out here. Let's talk about them. I mean, that's all. I'm just saying I am all for an open discussion about this, not what we've got
But I thought
now.
that if you subscribe to Santita Jackson and Friends show on Facebook, you cannot get COVID. Isn't that correct?
Well, honey, I will get deplatformed if I even assert that. if I say
if I say
COVID,
just a rumor.
if I say COVID,
In the immortal phrasing of our former president, everyone is saying that if you sign up and subscribe to the Santita and Friends show, you will not get cancer, heart attack, hypertension, stroke, COVID, or other known ailments. But we can't prove it. So I'm not saying it. I am simply telling you that everyone is saying it.
Are you putting your fingers in there? And that pinky out?
My hands aren't small enough to do it right.
Oh, see, you guys. Now I'm going to let you go. But in fact, I'm going to call you right back on the phone real quick.
Forever or just for now?
Never, forever. You can't get rid of me. Look, his daughter's birthday. His daughter and I share the same birthday, and we were born at the same.
Amazing.
And we were born at the same time, to the hour.
Yep.
She was born at 6:00, July 17th, as was I. You can't shake me loose, Max, if you tried.
Yeah. I was pulling for 7 o'clock secretly just because all the 7s would have been kind of cool. But yeah, 6 it was.
And I was even born on the East Coast, so it's right to the, yes, that's right there.
Oh, yeah?
So, yeah.
She was born in Lango and on First Avenue.
Yeah, no, look, I was born in Greensboro. Yes, that's right, in North Carolina.
Yeah, there you go.
That's right. But I'm going to call you right back because I wanted to share something with you. Something came true that you would appreciate. So,
Wonderful news. And thanks to all out there for putting up with my observations. Hope to come back despite my mediocre performance and have a good and productive week out there. Be safe.
Get out of here. He grows my numbers. I love it. I love you all. I'll see you tomorrow. Max, I'm going to call you